Hi, I'm Peter Dvorscak and welcome to West Crescent Ranch. I've been putting in a Nelson waterer. We did away with our old plastic waterers because we had some damage caused by the horses and for some other reasons, as you can see from on our website. What I'll be doing today is showing you how to put in a Nelson waterer. I've already put in the 6-inch PVC pipe, and I'll show you with the close-up in a second, including the shut-off valve. And I'll point out some features to you that I incorporated into building in the 6-inch PVC pipe that will help you in regards to installing your Nelson waterer. For example, as you see here, I have put in a cutout into 6-inch PVC and I've also put in a shut-off valve right here that allows me to reach in there and shut it off. Nelson does provide this shut-off valve for you, but this shuts the water off to the water itself, and then a backup shut-off valve in case I need to do work up in this area here. So I have a double shut-off valve. Also, you can see some insulation down in there, and I'll show you a top view here in a second. And that's my electric line going in there, which I've already prepped. The reason why I put the insulation in there is it does two things. It helps insulate the pipe in addition to the black insulation pipe that you see right here. Right here. But also, if I happen to drop any tools down in there when I'm working on the waterer, they won't go all the way down to the ground because, as you can see, it's about a 45-inch piece of PVC. Now, we cut this PVC to length in order to make a top height of 40 inches right here. Now, this is a little bit shorter for our mares than we did for our stallion because our stallion is a little bit higher, a little bit taller. And of course, these two blocks you see here are the mounting blocks for the waterer themselves. This is a piece of plywood and wouldn't be sturdy enough to hold the waterer itself, so I've screwed these mounting blocks to the plywood with 3 screws, 1, 2, 3, and then I will mount the waterer to here. And of course, you can see I've already got the water line in, and then I've got the electrical line that's right here, and I'll hook that electrical line up. Now, normally you'd run this electrical line in conduit, as you can see we have here, but this is a temporary line for when we redo the walls in the spring, because this is December 31st, 2010. We'll take all these walls down, and then we'll put this line in conduit. And what Nelson tells you is that they, in their diagram, they show both the electric line and the water line coming up through the 6-inch piece of PVC. In our case, all we had was the water line down there already run. In this case, the electric line is up here. So what I had to do is, as you'll see as I zoom in, you see I cut a hole in the back of the PVC pipe and ran my electrical line through there. So that's where we're at right now. And since I'm running the camera by myself, you'll have to bear with me as I move around. But that's basically the setup. 6-inch piece of PVC. And of course, in advance, you have to decide what height you want to place your waterer. You don't have to use these mounting blocks if you don't want to, if you have a sturdy wall to mount to. But of course, this is the top here of the waterer. And you don't want to put them too low because the horses will poop in them, or you don't want to put it too high because then the horses can't get the water. And it is a pretty good reach down into the Nelson water for the horse to get the water. But they are great waterers, and have already used one in the stallion stall. Whoops, that's my shadow. So anyway, there's the water all set up, PVC. Of course, you can see it goes down in the ground. And all that's below grade. Now I'll show you some techniques. The first thing you have to realize, keep in mind, is that the Nelson water is an excellent product, but this is a pretty tight fit right here on your piece of 6-inch PVC. So you want to minimize the number of times you take it on and off there to get the proper height. And also, make sure you put these screws in, you put the screw heads inside and the bolts outside, because that's why they have this recessed area in each one of the holes. So I'm going to put the water onto the PVC. And I've already pre-drilled my holes in my mounting blocks, and you can see it just wiggles on there. And they do recommend, Nelson does recommend, not more than 1/2 inch protruding. So use some good lag screws, galvanized preferably. And if you can afford the stainless steel ones, they're great, because the Nelson water, of course, is made out of aircraft grade aluminum, and some of them are stainless steel. Like I said, they are excellent products. We really enjoy the one we put in the Stallion stall. Of course, the Stallion, he enjoys it more than we do. But it's going to be cold here in January pretty soon, and has performed very well. You can see that the bolt holes already drilled. This takes a minute or two. Now, since the lag bolts aren't the exact diameter of the holes, you will have to level up the water just a little bit before you finally tighten down. And I'll go get my handy dandy aluminum level. Now, Nelson does tell you it's important to make sure you put it in level. You can see we're out of level right now. And it's important because the bowl works on a level process, and if the bowl is out of level, and it may not fill it properly. So I'm a little bit off to one side. So I can tap that down, and then I can raise that side up, and we're between the lines, which is pretty good. Now you can see right here that the top of the water housing is not at the top of the 2x4, and that's because the 2x4 has enough room where when you put the top on to the water, it will be covered up. But you could do it either way. You could make these tops here flush with the water housing, or do it like I did. It really makes no difference. Double check it one more time, because they say in the construction business, measure twice and cut once, right? Now that the water housing is level, I'll go ahead and tighten down my lag screws. And that'll hold the water housing level. Now, I also have a couple more screws to put in, because the water housing bolts to the 2x4 with 4 mounting screws. And of course, I pre-drilled those holes to make it easier, much easier to get the lag screws in there. I'll take the camera off the tripod in just a second, and I'll show you down in here. See if we can get a shot, because it's getting late in the afternoon. But here you can see the lag screw on the left, and then the lag screw right here. See if I can get a light on there for you. And there's the other lag screw down there. It's a little crooked, but that's alright. It'll straighten up when it goes in. And you can see the fourth lag screw right there. And as you can see, if you look down in there, I've got a little play in there, so I get to move it, adjust it accordingly. You can see my electric line, the orange electric line. And the reason why it's orange is because I used an old piece of extension cord rather than the wire, and it'll work just as fine. It's up to you, but eventually it should be put in the conduit, metal preferably. And then of course you can see the insulation down there. Like I said, it helps insulate the pipe, and I'll put some more in there. And of course you can see my lower shutoff valve and then my upper shutoff valve. And I like that insulation there because I said if you happen to drop a tool down there, you can just reach down near the top and get it. So we'll finish tightening down the side bolts. And the instructions for the Nelson water as to put them in are pretty good. You have to take a few minutes to read them and understand them. And I do recommend, if you don't have plumbing and electrical experience, that you hire a plumber and an electrician, preferably one that does both, because obviously it requires an electric line and a plumbing line. Otherwise, you'd be awfully frustrated in regards to getting the Nelson water in. Of course, a lot of places, if you're a homeowner and you can do the work yourself. In this case, there was no permit required because the water lines had been run a couple years ago when we put the run-in stalls in. And of course the electric is already in. But since I'm just plugging into the outlet and not actually running a new line, there's no electrical permit required. But I do want to say that the gentleman who ran our electric, Press Mullins, he's on the website at Mullins Incorporated. Excellent. If you happen to be in the Prince William County, Stafford area, I highly recommend him. Very reliable. His family's hard-working group, and he's done thousands of dollars worth of work for us out here. And we'll continue to use him as we build our barn in 2011 or 2012. So we got all the 4 lag bolts tightened down, and of course I didn't drop my tool down there, which is a good thing. And then the idea next to is put the bowl assembly in there, at which time we will hook up the electric and the water. Right now I'm going to put some more insulation down in there, which is going to require a pair of gloves that I'll go get, and I'll be right back. Now some people may fill this up with that spray-in foam, but I don't like that spray-in foam because obviously it will adhere itself to the pipes, which I don't particularly care for, and may create problems for you if you ever have to pull the pipe out of the house. And you can see I'm pushing the insulation right in front of my little window that I've cut out. You can see that down. Let me take a look at the camera. Nope. As you can see right down there, that little pink area, I'm pushing the insulation right down there, right here, and then I'll put a little flap over it, and I can just push the insulation away, and I can get to the shutoff valve up there if I have to do some work. I just use a little piece of PVC in order to pack it down in there, or whatever you want to use. Now it will be important to cover that little access hole up because you don't want the horses nibbling on the insulation. And it's good, you know, because I can put it in there in pieces and pull it out when necessary. There we go. And you can use something as simple as a piece of tape to put over there. If you want to build something fancy, you can. But anyway, I've got my insulation in there. Now this is what Nelson Waterers call the water bowl housing. And it is a little tricky to get in and out of there. What I encourage you to do is, the first one I put in, that you really can't, on this electrical box, since the mounting screws, holes, are here in the back of the box, and I'll show you once I put it in, you really can't use this knockout in the back side because it will interfere with allowing you to mount the electrical box back on the bracket. So what I choose to do is you either run it in from the side or from the front. I was going to run it in from the front, but I thought I'd put it in from the side, and of course I had to get a block to put back in there. But as you can see, I've got the wires out, and they give you a good set of instructions to make sure you connect it up correctly and get it grounded. Now you have to be careful when you put it in there because the electrical cord has got to be out of the way to sit down in here. And then of course they point out to you it's important that the water supply line go over top of the heating element, not underneath, because that's what they tell you to do. So I'm going to drop it down in there. And I'll give you a couple of pointers. Oh, I forgot one piece. Hold on. Little metal shield goes on the right-hand side. So I'll slip that down in there. So, oops, sorry about that. You got to remember that you got to put the electrical box down in there. Drop it down in there. And I'll point out a couple tips here. Now, I encourage you to make sure you tested your, I should have told you in the beginning, but I encourage you to make sure you turn your water on and check all your plumbing leaks before you put all your assembly together, which I did. And I found a little leak, but I fixed it. Now I want to show you something right here. This little plastic washer right here, you may forget to release that from the copper tube when you're trying to take out the water bowl assembly. So don't forget to do that. And of course you have to make sure you put that back together when you put it in there. And then as you can see, I got my shutoff valve right here. I've got my water line over here. And I've got my electric line right up here, which I'll hook up into my electrical box. It really doesn't make any difference which way you put the electrical box in, because on the Stallion water, I put the thermostat over on this side. And of course they ship it to you with the thermostat facing off to the left, but I haven't found any difference. But Nelson Water may have a different say about that. And then of course you want to make sure that you're set down on there. Now I've already set my screws out so I can feed my electric line through there. Of course it's not on, which is a good thing, and now I'll feed my electric line through there. And make sure you got enough slack. Doesn't look like my, there we go. Okay, and you can always, once you tighten it down, you can see it doesn't pull back out. It may wiggle in there a little bit. Of course, this is your thermostat right here. And then what I want to do is now this comes connected together already, so don't take that apart. Since I'm an aviator by trade and not an electrician, the way I always remember is black is bad, black is hot, and I'll connect those two together with electrical connector. And as you can see, I've made sure the connector has covered the cut ends of the insulation. You can see it's covered. Looks like I'll have to trim a little bit of the green wire off so you can make a good ground. And that's where your handy-dandy wire strippers come in. And I'll go in there. Oops. And of course, working in the horse stall, one of the very important things is you don't want to leave trash on the ground, because if it gets up in the horse's hoof, that would be a very bad thing, and it's a very bad problem. So we're very extra careful around here in regards to picking things up as soon as we drop them on the ground. Now Nelson Waters points out to you that your ground that you bring in goes to this grounding screw, whereas this one, which is also a ground, goes into the screw that goes into the bracket. And then of course make sure it's good and tight. Now since I got myself a little slack here, I can pull the electric wire back out, and I'll show you in a second. And this is a little bit tougher to get to. And this is one part you do have to be careful about. So you can see I got a green screw and a silver screw, and I try not to put stuff down in there, otherwise it may fall down and I have a difficult time getting those screws retrieved. But this old screwdriver my daddy gave me, and I really enjoy using it. You can see it's got tips in there. And I'll put the screw through the green electrical line outlet, and then I'll line up the holes. Struggling. You got it in there. And I'll show you what I'm talking about. How tight it is to work in there. You can see it tight quarters in there, but you know, you want to take the time, make sure you get it done correctly. What I was having trouble with was this green screw right here, making sure it was properly grounded. That right there. And that grounding is very important. You can see it's tight quarters down in there working in that, around that, in and around that electrical box. So I got both grounds hooked up. I got to put one last screw in there to mount the electrical box tightly in there. The only thing I don't like about so far is some of the screws on the Nelson water are slotted screws instead of Phillips heads, and those slotted screws are sometimes awfully difficult to turn, and I think they would be well advised to go to a all Phillips head screws or square head screws or something, because those slotted screws are so difficult to turn. But it's their water, not mine. See, in this case, it's very difficult to get the slotted screw in there. I mean, get the slotted screw started. Not because it's a slotted screw, but because there we go. Okay, so I have my black wires hooked up, my white wires hooked up, and my two ground wires hooked up. And we'll get the cover for the electrical box. Hi, welcome to West Crescent Ranch. We're out here in the pasture with my honeys running the camera. Of course, I'm Peter Dvorscak, and my honey's Karen. And we're following from the last segment. That is, we've already got the housing installed. We're here to put the rest of the assembly together. And I want to show you a couple things inside here that are important before we actually put the assembly in. My honey will move the camera over here. I want to show you the electrical box that's in. Can you see that, hon?
Yep.
Okay, you want to zoom in? And the important thing about the electrical box, obviously, is to make sure that you got it properly grounded. They give you two grounding points. One is the green screw that you want to ground, and then your grounding wire that comes with your electrical cord. And those are important to get hooked up. The other important thing is I want to show you is you have several knockout holes on the electrical box in order to run your electrical line in there. And unfortunately, the back knockout holes will not work, because if you run your electrical line up through the back or through the bottom, it'll be very difficult to screw the electrical box onto the mounting bracket. So as you can see, I've brought it in from the side, or you can bring it in from this front here, depending on how things are fitting together. And then, of course, once you get the electrical connections hooked up, you want to put your cover plate back on, and you do want to be careful, because you know, the screws are small and you can easily drop them, and that's why I've got insulation stuck down here. As I told you, is the insulation, if you drop something down in there, will help you from going down to the bottom of the pipe. And it's a little chilly out here today, so if I'm sniffling, you'll have to forgive me. And make sure all your connections are tight. Oops. As you can see from the plumbing connections, the pink tape, the Teflon tape, I opted to use the Teflon tape instead of the putty, because Teflon tape works a little bit better in my opinion. And of course, the shutoff valve that's supplied with the water assembly. Of course, I've already installed the water filter that goes inside this copper tube that they supply for you. Alright, we got the electrical box all hooked up, bolted on there. Make sure our electrical connection is tight. And I'm getting ready to put the assembly in here. This is assembly that works to shut the water off and on depending on when the bowl gets full or not. And what I recommend that you do is do not cut the copper tubing, because it's got a little bead at the end and it's on there for a reason, help keep it nice and tight whenever the water is flowing. So if you have to, cut the rubber tubing off and not the copper tubing. And you can see I've cut mine off a little bit to make it fit to the appropriate length. And to help it get off and on a little bit easier, I always use my handy dandy WD-40 and spray a little bit on there onto the piece of copper pipe. And that helps your water tube, your supply, your rubber tubing slip on and off there easily. And the important thing is, remember, they tell you make sure that the rubber tubing is above the heating element. So as you slide it down in there, and of course you want to make sure this metal plate that they supply is also in there. And you see it'll just rest on there. You got 2 screws to put in. And I'll make sure my electrical line's out of the way. It's important the direction you put this clamp on, so it'll be easy to tighten up once you get the rubber tubing on there. And since I put that WD-40 on there, it'll be a little bit easier for me to slip my rubber tubing on there. And since I got my rubber tubing on there now, as I told you, if you have that clamp in that position, see, it's very easy to get to. If you had it back over here, it might be a little bit more difficult. And then just tighten her down. And that's good to go. And then the 2 screws we'll have to put in there. Something I want to point out to you is these are aluminum screws, so they can't be picked up with a magnet, which is a little bit of a pain. So you have to be careful that you don't drop those down in there. And they're a little bit difficult to get in sometimes. Make sure you get yourself a long straight blade screwdriver. And of course, tighten them down. And I'll tighten them down all the way until I get the second one in. Of course, don't forget you got your metal plate in there. And before you tighten down the second one, you want to put your copper supply tube back in a little plastic retaining clip that they supplied for you, which helps hold that copper tubing in place, and then it just snaps together. And tighten both sides down. So we got our shut-off valve turned on. Got the rubber tubing running up over top of the heating element and the electrical cord out of the way. As you can see, it's a tight fit, primarily because I put an extra shut-off valve further down, like we talked about in the last episode. And now you got the housing, and you see it tilts. So as the water fills up, it will shut off. The counterweight that they provide for you, you have to kind of guess as to where the counterweight is going to go, because it slides a little bit of a slide here in order to adjust it forward and back. But the best thing to do is just set it in the middle. And just so you know, that screw right there stays in place, which is very helpful. Because it won't fall out when you take the nut and the washer off. Now that's a 1/4 inch ratchet. It works pretty good. Loosen up a little bit, and like I said, we'll move it out to about halfway on the slot, and you'll have to adjust that depending on how much water goes in the bowl, but usually I'll start in the middle. And then you get your bowl, and what they tell you to do is make sure that your water's on, and we'll turn it down on the shut-off valve until it starts just to drip out just a little bit. And this screw right here is what adjusts the water flow into the pan. Of course, that's a little too much. And that's alright, not going to hurt anything. And then they say just to screw that down in there until it starts to drip just a little bit. As you can see, you can adjust the screw a little bit, and you can see as you screw the screw in clockwise, it'll start to drip. And they say until there's a steady drip, and you can read the instructions. There you go. And you slip the bowl in there. And you can see as the bowl fills up and tilts forward, it'll shut off. And there it goes again, and it'll drip. And you can adjust the flow, and then what you can do is, if that's too slow for you, what you'll do is you'll tip the bowl forward, put the lock in place, take the pan out, and then you'll turn the screw clockwise a little bit more. They recommend 1/4 turns. And take the lock off, and you can see how much difference it changes in the flow, and that may be a little bit too much. So we'll turn it back a little bit. And that's still a little bit too much flow. I'll turn it back a little bit more. And that's not a bad flow right there. And then of course it'll fill up. And you want to go ahead and let it fill up because then you'll have to adjust the counterweight when the bowl gets full. And it's just a matter of trial and error to get the right flow in there. It is important to put that water inline filter in there because, like I said, it'll keep the sediment out, as I learned the hard way. These are great waters.
You want me to turn it off?
No. Okay, now you can see the water stopped running and you can see the bowl is partially filled up. Now the best way to judge it is to put the top on and see how much water is in there. And you can see there's a pretty good separation between the casing here, the top, and the bottom of the water bowl. And of course the horse can only get down in there so far. So what we'll do is we'll remove that top, which is very well designed. Put the shutoff valve on. Keep the water in there. And then we'll adjust our weight on there to allow more water. To allow more water, you got to push it further out. And we'll push it out a little bit more and tighten it back down. I didn't dump the water out. I left it in there. Set it back down in there. Take your lock off. And you can see it shuts off by itself automatically. And then check the lid again. Put the lid back on there. Then we'll probably move it out a little bit more because it has a little bit more room to fill up in there. Make sure you lock it in place. Set the bowl back down in there. Take the locking lever off, let it fill up. And then it's just a matter of trial and error. And then this probably still needs to be adjusted out a little bit more because I know not much water went in there. It looks like that the weight's almost at the maximum length of that slot on there. And then there you go. Now what we'll do is we're going to make a test, lock it off, dump the water out. We're going to dump the water out. Clean the bowl out a little bit. And then you can see it'll fill back up when you set the bowl in there and take the locking mechanism off. And we'll let it run and fill up. And then that'll conclude the installation of the Nelson water. We really like them. They are they're great waterers. We have another one in the other stall. That's why my honey's fighting the tripod, but that's all right. There you go. And they're great waterers. We really like them. The only recommendation is to them is that I wish they would replace the slotted screws, because the slotted screws are a little bit difficult to turn sometimes. I would suggest they replace them with Phillips head screws. But other than that, it is a great water. You can see it's filling up there. Of course, I have my work light here because the sun wasn't out in full force today. And don't be concerned that it might fill up too slow, because the horse will always come back and get some more water to drink. Then we'll let it fill up, and we may have to make one more adjustment on the weight, but that's all right. Let's see how it works out. Don't forget to put that little metal insulation plate in there, otherwise the heating element may melt this plastic insulation that they put in there.
Is that it, hon?
No, not yet. And then we'll put the lid back on and call it a day. My honey's waving to the horses out there. Unfortunately, they can't wave back.
He's looking over here. I don't know what y'all are doing in my stall.
And it's good to make sure that the does shut off properly. Up, Andrew is sticking his head. There it goes, and you can see it filled up and shut off pretty well. And there you go, and that's it.